Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I don't think we have any new folks today, so I welcome the family here today. And I would like to begin by just speaking for a moment to the Christchurch event in New Zealand. I must have received about 100 emails from various ministers that I work with, clergy, rabbis, interfaith peace partners, expressing their condolences. And so I want to say something that I think is very important. People are sending emails to me and they're saying there's no answer. Islam, there's always an answer. And so we are to repel good for evil. And so we must keep our anger in check. My heart and my condolences go out to the families who have lost loved ones and friends. But what we have to look at, and it's very important, again, is not to repel evil for evil. We repel good for evil. That's the command of Allah. And the messenger of Allah, I.S.L.A.M, came as a mercy to mankind. So we mete out mercy. We mete out love, peace, mercy, and forgiveness. This is the command of Allah. When the people stoned the messenger of Allah, ﷺ, in Taif, he prayed for them and it became a Muslim nation. So we must pray for those people. And then I have to say this. The 49 people that died, they died in the house of Allah, the safest place in the universe. They died on Friday, the holiest day of the week. They died in the month of Rajab, in a sacred month. And now they are in the presence of the divine. So let us find some solace in the fact that they could not have died in a better hal, a better state, or a better place. And I think this is where we have, when we defer in a matter, when there's a lot of conflict and dialogue about a matter, we must always train ourselves in the midst of our pain to go to Allah and His Messenger and see what Allah says. So I received phone calls from West 2 and from Channel 13 to do interviews, but my weekend was so packed that I unfortunately had to say no. And interestingly enough, one of them said, we want to come to your center, and I had to send them somewhere else. I had to arrange for them to go somewhere else. So it's these kind of times that really make me feel that despite my ego saying, no, you don't want any extra responsibility, a center would be so important because it would mean that people could come and interview. And so just want to throw that out. So I remind you to make dua for the families and for the friends of those who lost loved ones, and also to pray for our country. To pray for our country, because the Islamophobia is a multi-million-dollar industry. Yeah. And we do not want to feed into that in any way, shape, fashion, or form. Tuesday, March the 19th, inshallah, I will be participating in a vigil here on campus regarding the Christchurch event. And I would ask you to pray for us. It'll be very short, but I would ask you to pray for those of us who are doing that vigil here on campus. The box here is for feminine products that are donated to poor students at Rollins College. So we do have, contrary to what people might believe in this country club school, we have a population of folk that have been invited to be here because they are indigent. They are poor. And so we are collecting. If you'd like to donate to this, just you can put money instead, and I will give that to the office. And that would be anything that are toiletries, any kind of toiletries, but it is for female students. Okay. In terms of announcements, Naran, as you can see, my other half is not here today. She is in a tournament in Vera Beach doing da'wah. and she sent me a text and say, I hope you rested well. We won our first 2 matches. And right now, the team that she's on, the league that she's on, is at the top. They could literally lose 4 games and they still would be at the top. And it's not possible for them to lose 4 games at this point. So this is amazing da'wah, and I meet people that meet in Iran. And this is a testimony to her love for Allah. So she was at a tournament Saturday morning, at a league game, and a lady came and she said, I came to watch you play. She said, I came because you're so graceful, and no matter what happens, you're so peaceful. And she said, she pulled her aside. She said, I just want you to know that's the only reason I came today. She said, I watch you, and I just see just this peaceful, centered person. Now, I couldn't have said that if she was here, but she's not here. And so, yes, she is indeed doing a great, different kind of da'wah, for which I am so grateful to Allah.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I'm so glad that I'm part of this. Sorry, I'm taking a little bit of credit of that. Because I remember when I invited her to play pickleball, and we walked in, and of course she has great tennis skills, and she walked into the something one, the place that we play pickleball. She brightened everybody's eyes, and the way that she's played, and she started playing pickleball so beautifully. Everybody in that place wanted to play with her, and it is beautiful to see that she's doing dawah, and the hijab is this beautiful statement, and anybody can see it, and it's basically mostly Christians or non-Muslims that are playing, and then she has her mark and doing dawah this way.
And people are coming to her and asking her all the time questions about Islam because they feel safe with her. So alhamdulillah. Friday morning about 1:30, something like that, we received the news that we are grandparents to identical twin daughters, Athea and JC. And the twins are doing well as mom is doing well. And so we will be trying to go to Boston as soon as we can arrange it to see those precious grandchildren. Yesterday, Bonnie got married, and her husband, Navajo, who you may have remembered, came to the class. At that time, he was not husband, but now he is. He did his shahada yesterday, alhamdulillah. So we have another person in the fold of Islam. Please make dua for Sergio. He has the flu, and so the doctor said he would need to be in bed for 5 days. So just please make dua for them. Saturday. Yeah, he did his shahada yesterday, and they got married yesterday. So Saturday, March the 23rd is our monthly potluck dinner. And the address in my diary says 2121 South Hiawassee Drive. Is that correct? That is not correct. Not how. Okay, so it's at the United Methodist Church in the attic, right?
Correct.
Okay, so it's at the same place in the attic. I beg you, I beseech you, I implore you, I plead with you lovingly to commit to what you're going to bring and bring that. Because what often happens is it will end up with 10 cakes, no meat, and
nobody's supposed to be
sometimes no salads. And so if you could kindly coordinate and commit to something that's balanced, something that represents the balance in terms of food, al-mazan, that will keep this family healthy and not turn us into type 2 diabetics. We are, that was a nice way to say it, wasn't it? We are 50 days away from Ramadan, inshallah, plus minus a day. Today is the 10th of Rajab, so we have 20 days in Rajab and 30 days in Sha'ban, plus minus, according to the lunar calendar. So I remind you and myself that this is also a sacred month. The month of Rajab is a sacred month, and the good deeds that you do in the month of Rajab are of higher weight. They receive more reward, and the things that you do that are haram, which you don't hardly ever hear me say that word, have a greater punitive nature. I should say, a heavier penalty. So I remind you and myself of that, inshallah. That particular halaqah, I will be talking, inshallah, about taqwa. And you'll understand why I'm going to be talking about that. I want to go into in depth about taqwa. We'll talk about, be one of the reflection questions today, but that will help indicate to me a baseline of the knowledge that you actually have about it. And then I'm going to be introducing some more intricate ideas about the word and the root of taqwa, inshallah, at the potluck on Saturday the 23rd of March. So, and alhamdulillah ta'ala, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh. Wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. وَمَن يَهْدِهِ اللَّهُ فَلَا مُضِلَّ لَهُ وَمَن يُضْلِلْ فَلَا هَادِيَ لَهُ وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا عَبْدُهُ وَرَسُولُهُ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ حَقَّ تُقَاتِهِ وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. Indeed, all praise is due to Allah. We praise Allah. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil in our soul and from our sinful deeds. Those who are guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no one can misguide them, and those who are not guided by Allah, they are in misguidance. I bear witness that there is no God, there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Muhammad ﷺ is his servant and messenger. O ye who believe, fear Allah, as Allah alone should be feared, and die not except as Muslims. Amma ba'd, to proceed. So today, alhamdulillah, inshallah, we will look at a verse that I'd like you to memorize. Surah 2, verse 185. So if you can do it, I want you to memorize chapter 2, verse 185, and chapter 2, verse 183. Not necessarily memorize it if that's a difficulty for you, but I want you to know that reference. If I were to ask you on a test, what is the mission statement of Ramadan, I would want you to say to me, Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah 2, verses 183 and 185. And inshallah today we will talk about that. So as we begin this lecture, alhamdulillah, we will read this verse, this second verse that I named, and we will look at the key points about the month of Ramadan. It was the month of Ramadan in which the Quran was first bestowed from on high. Now, let me talk about what that means. The Quran was brought by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as was the Injil, and as was the Torah, to the lower heavens, the lowest heaven. And then various messengers of God would receive that revelation through the angel Jibreel. And so that's what it means. It was during this time that those holy books were brought to the lowest of heavens. And then, of course, we know that the Quran itself was revealed over 23 years to the messenger of Allah, Muhammad ﷺ, by the angel Jibreel, by piecemeal. So in this month of Ramadan, the first thing here that we see, that we celebrate, and that we embrace is that this is actually the month where guidance came to mankind. Where haqq, where truth came, was actually in this month, in the aforetime. In the time even before you would think about Arabic, this month was ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Quran was first bestowed from on high as a guidance unto men and women, and as self-evident proof of that guidance, and as a standard by which to discern the truth from the false, the true from the false. So whenever we differ in a matter as Muslims, we always refer to the Quran and the Sunnah, or Allah and His Messenger. When we differ in an issue, we refer to Allah and His Messenger, or the Quran and the Sunnah. And so we always have the answer. Hence, whoever of you lives to see this month shall fast throughout it, But he that is ill or on a journey shall fast instead for the same number of other days. Did I give you the clicker?
I plugged it in. You did give it to me.
Where's the clicker?
I don't know the actual
Okay.
itself.
Okay. Laith, will you just click the next slide then, so that I don't mess up the camera? Thank you very much. So if we can come back to the class, the verse continues, God wills that you shall have ease and does not will you to suffer hardship. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala desires that you complete the number of days required and that you extol Allah for Allah having guided you aright and that you render your thanks unto Allah. So here we see that this whole idea of extolling Allah during this time and rendering thanks to Allah, actually registering your gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these are very big issues and behaviors that we want to adopt during the month of Ramadan. And since we are in a sacred month, we should be adopting this now in order to prepare ourselves, because what are we doing this month? We are eradicating the weeds, the demons, the issues in our heart, and we are preparing our heart for the month of Sha'aban, when it will rain on that heart, and that we have tilled and soiled will be ready for the produce that will come in the month of Ramadan, inshallah. And here is the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 183. O you who have attained to faith, O you who have Iman, O you who believe, fasting is ordained for you as it was ordained for those before you, so that you might remain conscious of Allah. Now I will talk, of course, today about remaining conscious of Allah, but I am specifically, inshallah, planning to expound upon this at the halaqah, the potluck on the 23rd of March, Saturday night, at St. Luke's United Methodist Church. Let me remind you that those who are ill or on a journey, those that are ill specifically, can feed the poor instead. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always gives a concession. Those who have diabetes and cannot fast, they can feed the poor. So the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us concessions. And there's never ever a situation where Allah does not make it easy for us to do acts of ibadiyah, acts of worship in the month of Ramadan. Commercials are mostly about eat this, drink this, wear this, play here, play there, fun spot, Universal Studios, Disney. I don't know them all, so you probably are ahead of me there. Play there and so on, all appealing to the dimension of the physical self and the seen world. So go and lose yourself for a whole day at Sunspot, whatever it's called. You understand where I'm coming from. Lose yourself, completely entertain yourself, and whatever you do, don't think about Allah while you're there. This is what you will hear on commercials. They won't tell you that latter part, but that's just the result thereof. How many commercials do you see instructing you to be kind, generous, hospitable, forgiving, humble, modest, respectful, or moral? We know that the whole marketing industry predominantly is predicated on fear. If you don't use cover-up makeup, you'll be ugly. Because what's under there that God created just isn't good enough. And if you don't drink this, you won't be cool. And if you don't eat at this place, you're not with the elite part. And on and on. And then there are universities espousing viewpoints, humanism, various viewpoints that people have made their religion. Oh, I am an environmentalist. Oh, I am this. Oh, I am that. instead of saying, I am one that is submitted to Allah. I am one that has surrendered my whole self, my living and my dying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have you ever heard a commercial that said, think of your heart? And I don't mean the 4-chamber heart. There are some commercials, by the way, out there about heart attack awareness. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the spiritual heart. Have you ever heard a commercial that said, think of your heart? Don't only think of your stomach or bringing pleasure to your extremities or senses. If you think about it, and I never like to say all, because nothing is always, but I'm guessing that probably at least 99% of all commercials are going to be appealing to your nafs, your senses, somehow to satisfy your extremities. And if you do not have ruh thinking, if you do not have soul thinking, if you do not have the consciousness of Allah, taqwa, in this context, then you will be thinking about what they are telling you. And you will be brainwashed about what Fox and CNN and NBC and CBS and BBC, whatever they're telling you, then that's what you'll follow. So if you don't have ruh thinking, soul thinking, then you cannot think that way, and you can't offer it to other people. They actually will not know better. The fast of Ramadan liberates us from our passions and addictions and reminds us that there is life beyond the physical life. There is joy beyond material joy. During Ramadan, when we abstain voluntarily from those elements, we begin not only to talk about kindness and compassion, but actually feel kindness and compassion and actualize it more. So let me ask some questions for a minute. And just raise your hand. How many of you go to the masjid more in the month of Ramadan than any other month in the year? How many of you pray more and pray more on time in the month of Ramadan than any other year? Part of the year, rather. How many of you are more conscious generally of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the month of Ramadan than any other year? Part of the year. So let me ask you then, do we actually begin to feel differently as a result of that? When you are in the month of Ramadan and you see a homeless person, is your heart a little different? Is it a little softer? Is it a little more kind? Perhaps when it's not the month of Ramadan, you look at them and say, no, they're alcoholic. They ought to get a job like me. They ought to be working. No mercy whatsoever. But in the month of Ramadan, you might say, here's $1. So the month of Ramadan liberates us from our passions, from those excitable states, from those selfish ideologies that we so often hook into. When we voluntarily stop eating from dawn till sunset, and by the way, I have to stop and take a moment. True or false? True or false? Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset.
False. False.
Oh, you guys all got the bonus points. Muslims fast from?
Dawn.
And let me make a promise to you, and come and tell me if I'm wrong. You will be somewhere in the month of Ramadan, and an ignorant Muslim will stand up and say Muslims fast from sunrise to sunset. Yeah. Every Ramadan, I hear someone who is actually knowledgeable about Islam, not knowledgeable about the correct practice, and teaching other people not the correct practices of the month of Ramadan. I hear it every single Ramadan, and I think, patience, sabr, mercy, love, and forgiveness. When we voluntarily stop eating from dawn till sunset, then perhaps if we do that with focus, then we will begin to realize what it might mean to be homeless or to be without food. At least when we fast, we have a home to go to. And for many of us, we visit many of our friends' homes to break our fast. And when we visit our friends' homes, may Allah bless them and have mercy on them, we will eat 5-course meals. And we will not think about the Sahaba, the ones that we look up to the most, how they broke their fast with dates and water and sometimes a piece of bread. We will forget that it is the month of abstinence, that it is the month of restraint, and we will have every dessert we can possibly have. We will have every dish that we just are passionate about. You know, when people say, I just love mulahia, I just love baba ganoush, I just love biryani, I just love, and all that they love, they just pile it up in the month of Ramadan. All about what? Yourself. In the month of Ramadan, in this great time, this great guest that actually will give testimony to how you practice it. Imagine this guest going back to Allah and say, your servant celebrated food in the month of abstinence. In the month when they are supposed to be refraining, they are down there talking and gossiping in the month and filling their bellies. If we are involved internally with our fast, then we begin to know what it is to be hungry, and our hunger is by choice, but there are those who are hungry by circumstances, and they don't have homes to go to and break their fast. They don't know when they'll break their fast. And as I say that, there are Muslims all over the Middle East that don't know when they will get their next piece of bread. There are Muslims in Africa that do not know when they will have water. And yet we will sit here in the month of Ramadan, in the month of guidance, in the month where we receive the Quran. And we will laugh, and we will joke, and we will waste large portions of food. And our heart will not be in Ramadan. We will not only talk about it, but we, through fasting, are moved in this month of giving to give them money and food. We feel their pain in our heart and say, there but by the grace of God go I. I was blessed as a young man to find myself in New York City, and there were nights when I did not know if I would have a place to stay. By the grace of God, I never ever didn't get a place to stay. But there were days when I did not know if I would have food to eat. I know a little bit about this, but God spared me from actually living on the street. Fasting is not about celebrating eating. It's about celebrating not eating. And I know that many of you will not like this lecture. I know that many of you may be seething inside because this goes against your nafs. But I have to say it again, because when I stand before Allah, I want Allah to say that I taught my students the spirit of Ramadan. Fasting is not about celebrating eating. It is about celebrating not eating. Fasting is not about celebrating eating. It is about celebrating not eating. Ramadan is celebrating an inner dimension of fulfillment and nourishment. Imagine that in the month of Ramadan, I would talk about my heart is full. My ruh is full. I am inspired by the fact that the devil is locked up, and anything that I do in this month, I cannot blame the shaitan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving me an opportunity to see where my weaknesses are. And then He's giving me a month and making it easy for me to fix it, because in that month, the shaitan is locked up. It seems that in areas highly populated by Muslims, Muslims have developed this habit of eating more during Ramadan than outside of Ramadan. People increase their budgets in Ramadan to eat food and desserts that they don't usually eat outside of Ramadan. Having said that, if you are feeding other people, and I know people always can't wait after class to tell me, but what if you're feeding other people? If you're feeding other people, alhamdulillah, but there's nothing wrong with feeding other people a bowl of soup and a piece of pita. You do not have to feed people a 5-course meal. There are actually people now that do iftar hopping. They go around town looking for the iftar that has the best food, and they talk about it. I've heard them. Oh, we like to go to Imam Sachs' iftar because they always have a nice bread. People have said this to me. Where is the heart in that kind of fasting? Instead of celebrating the ruh and heart, which are not nourished by physical food, we continue to celebrate food to the extent that many non-Muslim journalists write articles in Ramadan about the types of succulent foods and delicious desserts that are prepared in Muslim homes during the month of Ramadan. They sometimes even include recipes for Ramadan. Now be looking in the Sentinel, and I guarantee I'll be shocked. It'll be the first year in my 32 years if they don't have an article, recipes for Ramadan. Is this what we want in the newspaper? Is this Islamic? Is this Muslim? Is this one who is submitted to peace? When there are people all over the world starving, and I'm helping write an article in the newspaper about indulgence and a month of abstinence and restraint. Is this what Ramadan is intended to celebrate? Maybe this is why many don't actually benefit from fasting. The only benefit we get from fasting in that case is perhaps only being hungry and thirsty for a certain amount of hours during a 24-hour period of time. Ramadan is about celebrating God consciousness, not eating. Ramadan is about discovering joy and a pleasure not in the realm of the physical, but in the realm of the heart and soul, the spiritual realm. It is my prayer that every one of you will be inspired by this lesson, that you will not be overly thinking about what you're not going to get, but that you will be inspired to get your pleasure in this Ramadan from being filled with ruh, filled with Quran, filled with good deeds, filled with restraint, restraining yourself from the temptation, abstaining from that which you would do that would not bring pleasure to your Lord. So when we break our fast, do we thank Allah, a month of extolling Allah and expressing gratitude? Do we say, Ya Allah? Before I race to that trough of food like an animal, let me first thank you, Allah. And let me ask you, Allah, to remind me that when I get to that food, to remember those that don't have it. And to be so grateful for that bowl of soup and that piece of pita. Or some hummus, maybe. So when we break our fast, do we thank Allah or do we eat with a vengeance? Which means our heart is not involved in our fasting, just the physical body depriving itself. Sometimes it is more challenging to be forbearing and patient when there is no food than when there is food. That's why when food is put on the table during Ramadan, many eat like ravenous animals because the heart is not involved. It's called tummy fasting. When we are taught and instructed to break our fast with really light food, the Prophet used to break his fast with a piece of a date and water if possible. And then there's the authentic ahadith that at any time, if by necessity, and listen to this hadith, it is often misquoted. The children of Adam need few morsels of food. This is the first sentence in this hadith. Listen. The children of Adam need few morsels of food, comma, but if by necessity. But if by necessity, maybe you work in the heat or you work under very difficult conditions, then a third for food and a third for water and a third for air. If by necessity. But people will tell you it's the sunnah, a third, a third, a third. No, it's a sunnah to eat few morsels. But if by necessity, a third and a third and a third. Now, what's funny to me is that I lecture on this and then I walk around to give my love to my family. To say, MashaAllah, how are you doing? And they cover their plates. Don't do that. I'm not the haram police. I'm not looking at your plate. When I come to greet you, I just want to greet you for the sake of Allah. I don't come to condemn you, to castigate you, criticize you, or indict you. So if you have a mountain of food, I'm not even going to think about it. But I am going to teach you. And inshallah, by this teaching, you will not make the mistake and be misled by watching other people who call themselves Muslims fasting incorrectly. After we satisfy the physical dimension and avoid the spiritual, we go to pray salah, unable to focus because we are so uncomfortable in our physical beings. How can our soul benefit from the speech of God and the salah when our ultimate focus and submission is bent on the physical stomach? When we eat a lot, what happens to the mind and what happens to the nafs?
I told you this 2 weeks ago. I had exams, so on Monday and Thursday I fasted, and then the other days I didn't. And when I was studying and I was fasting, compared to when I wasn't, I noticed that when I eat a lot, I feel lazy. So.
When we eat a lot, what happens to the mind and what happens to the nafs? The more I eat, the more foolishness I can promote. Watch it. Go to a restaurant. The more people eat, the crazier they get. I'm not kidding. If any of you have not observed this, I invite you, go sit at a restaurant and watch people. The more they eat, the more they talk. The more energy they have to gossip and talk and tell ugly jokes. How many can raise your hand that have seen this? And I see I forgot to add a title here. The nafs are enslaved, and it is enslaved as causing our mind to sleep. And we come to salah bored, yawning, and forgive me, burping and belching. Now we know that the Quran says that we should not eat onions and garlic and go to the masjid, and the scholars say it's okay if it's cooked. How many here who have fasted have stood by someone, and when you went into ruku'ah during Salatul Tarawih, and you could smell it like a garlic patch, and you really became sick, you actually feel nauseous, raise your hand if it's happened to you. And this is the month of Ramadan. Where is the rule? Where is the consciousness of God? And then as soon as the prayer is over, they go and they feed up again. They go back to the trough and they eat like crazy, and they just talk and talk and talk, drink coffee to 3 o'clock in the morning, but they can't pray Salatul Tahajjud and maybe not even get up for Fajr. Salah is a time of connectedness of the human heart with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The essence of Salah is the connectedness of one's heart to Allah, and we have to have a pure intention to do that and prepare our conditions to pray it with presence of heart, khushu', and the respect due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For many it becomes a ritual. As a matter of fact, what is very sad is that I know specific to Egypt, there is a soap opera that comes out every Ramadan. And there are families, and their ritual is to sit around the boob tube and watch this soap opera instead of going to the masjid. I have been to the homes of Muslims, and they say, "Oh, Imam Sykes, you got to watch this. We do it every year." And I say, "Do what? Say what? You're supposed to be teaching me. And you are inviting me to these people who are all about romance." 32 years ago, my first Ramadan, I was invited to partake in Taraweeh soap operas. I beg you, lovingly, don't fall prey to that. If somebody invites you, ask them with love, with gentleness, with tenderness, with mercy, and with kindness. How would that look like abstinence? How would that look like refraining? How would that look like refraining? And how would that look like extolling Allah and giving thanks to Allah and turning to the criterion of that which is right and that which is wrong? No, I have an opportunity to listen to a hafiz for about 2 hours, reciting the kalam of Allah, reciting something that brings shafa to me, healing to me. But no, I will choose instead the 75-inch, the 55-inch, whatever inch it is, television. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ teaches that the value of the salah of an individual is worth only the extent of the presence of one's heart in that salah. When you walk away from salah, ask yourself, how much was my heart in that prayer? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said about salah, if the heart of the individual is in focus, his or her limbs will be in focus. When we eat too much, we lose focus. Through fasting, we discover that there is life, pleasure, and joy outside of physical things such as eating, sleeping, drinking, copulating, and talking. You are going to see that some people will remain at the iftar while others are praying. Others will be trying to pray. And by the way, the person who is praying always has a right over the person who isn't praying. And the people that are not praying will be so loud that the people that are praying can't hear the hafiz. How many of you have experienced this? The Prophet ﷺ teaches, and watch what food does when we eat excessively or in a way that is not properly balanced. If by necessity, a third for water, a third for air, and a third for food. Ramadan and fasting helps bring that balance when we are focused, when we are God conscious, when we are mindful, when we are centered about what we are celebrating. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that the devil runs inside the child of Adam as the blood runs inside the veins of the child of Adam. The early scholars of Islam would teach, restrain, and narrow down the passages of the devil inside the human veins by fasting. So young folks, when their hormones are high and they desperately want to get married, but perhaps they haven't finished their education, or they haven't got the sufficient money that they feel they can ask for somebody's hand in marriage, what is the answer for them? Fast. Because God Almighty knew that if you're fasting, you won't have that energy to satisfy the passions, the excitatory states. The scholars recognize that too much food and drink fuels passions. It is interesting, this physical connection, yet the intent of it is in the spiritual world. The shaitan is not a physical entity. The shaitan is an unseen entity. It is beyond that. It can have the ability to transform and to materialize because it is an extraterrestrial being where we are unable to enter each dimension. Shaitan is able to enter our dimension. The Quran says he has access and will have access until the last day. Except in the month of Ramadan, we know that the devils are chained. Shaitan runs in the veins that feed the heart and mind, and the blood is fed by what you eat. If we eat properly and balanced and we fast physically, in other words, there will not be nourishment inside that blood for the shaitan. The course and path of shaitan inside of our veins will be narrowed. We will put up roadblocks and barriers so the shaitan can't move those other 11 months of the year. This is why we are enjoined to fast on Mondays and Thursdays and the middle 3 days of the month, to keep those veins narrow. And imagine if we ate properly, we probably would not have cholesterol problems and other problems due to eating how much we eat. The veins will be kept clean spiritually and clean materially. Muhammad ﷺ also teaches that fasting is a shield. It is a protection, and that it is consistent with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the verse that we previously looked at, "Oh, you have attained to faith." Fasting is ordained for you as it was ordained for those before you, so that you might remain conscious of Allah. Imagine that you would end your fast at sunset more conscious about what's on the table than what's in the heart. People are like, do you know what's on the menu? Do you know what they're serving tonight? Oh yeah, next Friday night they're having this. And look where the excitement is. Upon us, as it was prescribed for those before us, in order that we might attain taqwa. Please. And what is taqwa? This is a very, very, very short discussion about taqwa. But as I promised you, if Allah gives me health and strength and life and breath and a voice, on Saturday the 23rd of March, I'm going to talk in great detail about taqwa. Or at least 20 minutes of detail. Taqwa derives from the Arabic word wakayaki. Waka means to protect or shield, and itaka means to protect oneself. So here we have a month that is designed for us to protect our souls. Therefore, taqwa is a noun derived from that meaning, which means to shield or protect oneself. Jazakallah. So what do we need to protect ourselves from? What do we need to protect ourselves from? From the passions of the nafs and the impact of the shaitan. To protect the human being from the excesses and indulgence of the self that lead to chain the individual to be addicted to his or her desires instead of Allah's. I am heartbroken to say that there are people that for 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 years have gone through Ramadan making sure that they looked after one passion after the other passion after the other. As a matter of fact, in some cultures highly populated by people that call themselves Muslims, they will watch the soap opera, they will drink coffee to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and talk, They will sleep all day to avoid the actual fasting experience. And it's like a month of holiday filled with satisfying your nafs.
You actually get more blessings fasting here.
Yes.
I was going to say, like, one of the summers I was in Jordan, and I used to fast here. Actually, felt more of a spiritual fast here, because over there, the stores are usually, like, all stores are usually closed, and they're open right after the method. And they're open all night, so everyone stays out all night, and then eats right before dawn, and then goes to sleep after dawn, and wakes up at 6. So, yeah.
And so it is my responsibility to teach you the ruh, the spirit of Ramadan. And then if you do not follow it, I've done my job. To protect the human being from the excesses and indulgence of the self that lead to chain the individual to be addicted to his or her desires instead of Allah's. It is my desire, as I have done for 20 years, you will hear people say this, but in a little different way, to watch my soap opera. That's what our family's always done. Well, if you always do what you have always done, you will always get what you have always got. And until you do something different, you won't get anything different. So if you do your Ramadan like those people, you will not get much out of it. Surrendering to Allah and fasting frees us and protects us also from the wrath and displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because we want to seek nearness to the source of peace, we don't want to be on the journey to do things that will deviate us from that source of nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that source of nearness to peace. Let me ask, and predominantly I'm guessing that mostly the women in here do the cooking. I could be wrong, and I hope I am. How many of you women experience the joy of Ramadan when you stand at the stove all day cooking? I'm trying to get body language, but okay. It is a joy to cook. We don't do it all day long. Okay, alhamdulillah, I'm feeling better. But let me ask you this. Is your soul getting the maximum benefit if you are cooking more in the month of Ramadan, unless you're feeding more people, than you cook outside of the month of Ramadan? And I just want to, I know that this flies in the face of your excitatory states and your desires. I know that people don't like it when I lecture about this. I hear about it. But I want for you to have a spiritual Ramadan. And you will not have a spiritual Ramadan. Let me remind you guys that the camera is running, so when we talk and people watch it later, then there's this big long gap. If you can, keep your comments and your questions to the discussion time. That would be great, inshallah. Displeasure from Allah comes when we deviate from Allah's laws and Allah's path and Allah's ways. And the way we can be protected is by fasting in our heart, fasting in the spiritual realm. If I don't shield myself, I am the loser emotionally, morally, intellectually, and physically. So I shield myself from bad, and the consequences for me is joy in serving Allah in this life and victory in the life to come. So I shield myself from my desires. I restrain, I abstain. Fasting is an invisible shield, part of the unseen protection around us for those created things. How invisible is the shield? If I am excited, if I am into myself and my nafs, and I can't wait to get home and eat mom's kibbeh, or mom's baba ganoush, or mom's biryani. I'm not excited about the fact that I have done something for Allah, and my heart is so enriched, and I'm so attuned to abstinence and aware of those who are not choosing this, but I am. When one is fasting, one is to be focused on one's spiritual energies instead of focusing on one's food energy and one's physical energies. When one focuses on one's spiritual and moral energy, that will be good for them in this life and in the life to come. Fasting will give you the spiritual strength to face the challenges of the nafs, the lower desires. That is not where we get physical strength. Many times it is so difficult for me to do good. It is so difficult for me to refrain from harm and from that which is destructive and from that which is bad, and I feel weak even when I want to surrender spiritually. And we all know that time when we're actually warring inside, when the shaitan whispers, oh, I need to tell them about so-and-so. I need to. They really should know. They should know that so-and-so did so-and-so. And I wrestle with it, and I wrestle, and it doesn't feel good. And I ask Allah, oh Allah, let me surrender to you, not to my lower self. I want to do good, but I just can't. I am taken in this course of not being able to do good. It is easier for me to do wrong. It is easy for me to violate the norms of decency, morality, and goodness. So I need discipline. I need fasting. I need this month. I need this month to fix what I've done in the other 11 months. And imagine that if I really, really work hard in the month of Rajab, and I work really, really hard in the month of Sha'aban, in preparation for the month of Ramadan, then perhaps I can cut it down to 9 months. So in those months, I'm working on what I messed up in the other 9 months. I could really be physically strong like a football player, or I could be Mr. Universe and would I be able to control the desires to harm my spirit? If I want to see how strong a person is, perhaps I take your favorite piece of cake and I put it in front of you and I say, you cannot have this. You can only look at it. You can only smell it. You can even touch it, but you can't eat it. Yes. Will I ever do that to you? No. But I would encourage you to do it to yourself. I encourage you to take that favorite thing in your life, that thing that gets you the most excited, put it in front of yourself and say, for the sake of Allah, I will not. Sometimes I ask my students, let's have a time of quietness for 2 minutes. And they come and they see Imam Sykes, it felt like an hour. If you cannot keep your mouth shut for 2 minutes, what can you control in your life? This little tongue, this little thing called a mouth? If we cannot control it for 2 minutes, what kind of ummah will we be? People are going to say, gosh, when Sister Naredi is around, he comes out with all these muscles. I'm just thinking about the difference. Any moral impulse brings me to my knees because there is no spiritual strength, just physical. I just can't resist that piece of chocolate cake. I've just got to have it. But when you have that one bite, then you say, well, we can't let it go to waste. And then you eat the rest of it. If I focus in Ramadan, I develop spiritual strength. If I apply myself to its principles and I work hard on my heart, I will be more able to do better than before. If I prepare my heart in the month of Ramadan, I will be less prone to do wrong. My heart is broken, but I often have women that come to me and say, Brother Abdurrahman, I dread Ramadan. And I'm like, well, how can you dread Ramadan? Oh my God. They said, my husband is the most miserable human being on the earth during Ramadan. They say this to me. how can it be unless we are ignorant? Unless we do not understand the blessing and the true spirit of Ramadan, how can it be that we would be miserable in the month given to us by Allah of purification? The month of extolling Allah and giving gratitude. And yet we are ungrateful, but we're going to sit down to a 5-course meal, but we're miserable. Excitatory states. The path to do good becomes easier for me, and this leads me to the next point. How much difference is there in your life in or outside of Ramadan? I asked this question earlier. Are you more consistent in your salah, going to the masjid, reading Quran, being more compassionate? So in that essence, Ramadan is a dear friend to us that helps us be good. It's a dear friend, a very, very special, precious friend. He's coming in about 50 days to visit us. A friend that wants to encourage us to do good. How many of us could use that kind of friend? The day Ramadan ends, a terrible type of sadness always overwhelms me. It is like a loving, generous, kind friend is leaving me and I won't see him or her for another year. I have withdrawal from Ramadan. I struggle with my sadness because I miss that level of devotion. I miss that level of awareness that's so heightened. I miss the fact that so often I find myself in the divine presence more than I do in those other months, unfortunately. I always feel a genuine kind of sadness when Ramadan bids farewell. In its presence, I find a happiness not comparable to other times or types of happiness. That friend helped me to be good, and that friend gave me peace. I always find myself afraid to go back to things as they were, to the outside world without Ramadan. During the month of Ramadan, the devils, those extraterrestrial hyperspace types of beings, are chained. The gates of paradise, the home of peace, I.S.L.A.M, are wide open in this great month, and the gates to the dwelling of misery, violence, and hell are locked up. During the month of Ramadan, Allah's love, compassion, generosity, and mercy is so abundantly optimized. It's exponential. It affects the whole universe. 2 out of 7 are Muslim. And on some level, paradise is nearer to us. The gate is nearer, and the gates of hell are made further away. Ramadan is a window of opportunity and time open for me to journey into the hyperspace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have you ever felt really close to Allah when you were in dua? Perhaps at I.S.L.A.M or Taraweeh? More than before when you were in supplication? It's those moments when you know your heart is in the prayer and your heart feels connected to your Creator. You feel so near, so longing and desiring for Allah. When you are at this state, you are sad when Taraweeh is over. When it ends, you say, oh, I could just listen all night. No, I got to go back home and eat another meal in the month of abstinence. I got to make up for what I didn't eat in the month of abstinence, in the month of restraint. Allah is more generous than you and me, and Allah is more giving than you and me, and Allah gives more respite to you and me. And Allah's gates in Ramadan are more open than before. There are moments in time and in space, both created by Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assigned a special time and space in which the individual human beings can be nearer to the divine. And this is, of course, the month of Ramadan. Allah chose this to be so. For example, when you're in the prostration of Salah, that is a time in which one is nearest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In these moments, time and space don't mean anything. You even forget there's such a thing. In this month of Ramadan, we try to develop our heart, wherever it is in space and time, to be near to Allah. Whether it's time to break the fast, whether it's time for this or time for that. Ramadan is the time the devil is chained, and the gates of paradise are open to us, and the gates of hell are closed. It is like Allah is saying, "Come, my servants, come back to me." Allah says that all the time, but Allah makes the divine abundantly available every day in this holy month of Ramadan, in this window of space and time. In the last third of the night, when people are sleeping, Allah is calling to us and saying to us, the door is a little closer now. O you who believe, declared upon you as fasting as it was decreed upon those before you, that you might become righteous. How righteous will I come watching a television program? How righteous will I come sitting around gossiping when other people are praying? How righteous will I come if I fill my belly and I don't fill my soul? The virtue of the value of the human being lies in his or her spiritual reality, how well they develop their soul for what it is meant to be for. Adam was created out of clay, and prior to Allah breathing into Adam the divine's ruh, Adam did not have value. After Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala breathed into Adam the divine's ruh, Allah commanded the angels to lay themselves prostrate to our father Adam. It was the ruh of Allah that made the lifeless clay become an animated object created to serve Allah. How much ruh do you have in you? And I don't want you to answer that to me. We just have 2 more slides. On the divine scale, will we be measured by how much we developed or have that spirit in us? So the ultimate question is, how much ruh is in our moments of silence, our speaking, eating, drinking, socializing, recreation, fasting, salah, and charity? Without that ruh, every single thing we would do would be as valueless and worthless as clay. Lifeless. What gives life to your actions, my beloved, is when it's done for the sake of Allah. So, I ask all of you to pray for me. I ask you to forgive me if I said anything wrong today.